Hey, hello. This is Lenny. Just a heads up. I've been spending the last couple of weeks. I recently had COVID, and I've been getting over that, so it kicked the shit out of me. But I'm trying to make a recovery. It is not fun. Bear with me here because there's a movie that just came out recently that I really enjoyed. I've talked about it on Facebook a little bit. I was very skeptical about it. It was a movie that was in development for quite a while, actually, probably the last at least decade. I kept hearing about it. It's the new Mortal Kombat movie, the first live-action Mortal Kombat film since 1997's terrible Mortal Kombat Annihilation. So I have some thoughts on it. I guess I'm not too shocked that a lot of the criticisms have been kind of lukewarm about the film. I'm going to go on record to say that I've seen the film 3 times. I saw it, the night that it dropped on HBO Max that morning. And then I saw it the next day with my wife. And she fell asleep at the 25-minute mark. So I watched the rest of it by myself. And then I watched the beginning of it with my brother for a third time and finished it with my wife that night, making the third time watching it. And each time I saw it, I enjoyed it about the same each time. I guess I understand what the criticisms are and why some fans were disappointed. And there are critics out there who are fans, but also kind of have to let their critic side come out. I don't really consider myself a film critic. I used to love critiquing movies, but I just find that if you overanalyze a movie too much, you're going to not enjoy it as much. It's fun to talk about movies and talk about opinions, but I mean, at the end of the day, the filmmaker's job is to entertain you. Their job is not to tell a story that you want to be told. Their job is to tell you a story and have you passively watch it and be entertained by it. That's what filmmaking is. That's what it's been for years. Because of social media, we all feel entitled and more involved with the creative process. And there is that argument of, well, as fans of whatever property they're adapting for us, do we deserve better? I'll give you a little history of my Mortal Kombat knowledge and where my background is. There are Mortal Kombat fans who are really hardcore into the lore, and there are, I think, fans who really just like the fighting aspects and the fatalities and that aspect of it. I fall somewhere in the middle. I was introduced to Mortal Kombat in 1993, I believe. I was 10 years old. Like a lot of kids, at that age, very impressionable. I was probably too young to be playing Mortal Kombat, but you see all the older kids playing it in the arcades, and you're like, whoa, and then I had the game on Sega Genesis, and then I grew up pretty much playing the first 3 games on Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. And then the Mortal Kombat live-action movie came out in 95. The 90s was a very weird time for movies that were being adapted into video games. In the 90s, we had, of course, the first big one was the Super Mario Brothers movie. Then everybody forgets there was a Double Dragon movie, and then there was that Street Fighter movie, which was more or less, I guess, a decent adaptation. It just didn't translate very well to live action. Then you had Mortal Kombat. And I think of all of those, Mortal Kombat, I think most people would agree, does the best at adapting its source material despite it being PG-13. I begged my parents to take me to see that first Mortal Kombat, but in 95, I would have been, I think, 12 years old. My parents wouldn't leave me alone at a movie theater. They'd have to sit with me and watch whatever. So they were not going to sit and watch a Mortal Kombat movie, even if it was PG-13. Even in the 90s, I understood why that movie would have to be PG-13. I understood that, well, if you want more people to see the movie, you have to water it down a little bit. And that being said, it is a pretty decent adaptation of the game. It looks like Mortal Kombat, just without the blood and fatalities. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, the time of, hardcore R-rated horror films. And I understood even back then that the way the MPAA worked, an R-rated Mortal Kombat, even in the 90s, was going to be a hard sell. The big argument with a lot of the big slasher movies in the 80s was, even though they were rated R, so obviously, you had to be 18 or older to go see them in theaters. The criticism was that the filmmakers were actually targeting teenagers with those R-rated movies. And I think they were really trying to get away from that in the 90s. They would have been, I think, it would have been a hard sell to do an R-rated Mortal Kombat movie knowing that teenagers are going to want to go see it too, and not being able to because of that R rating. So I understand the R rating. I'm not saying I agree with how the MPA works. I'm just saying I understand that's the politics behind a lot of it. And remember, I was a die-hard Mortal Kombat fan. I was the guy who would study the instruction manuals and memorize the backstories and the profiles of all the different characters right up to Mortal Kombat 3. Because every game they would add characters, so there would be more backgrounds per character. When it got into like Mortal Kombat 4, that's when I stopped paying attention, because that's when they got very story-driven and very ridiculous and very hard to follow and more supernatural. As much of a diehard Mortal Kombat fan as I was, when I finally saw the 95 movie on VHS, I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was fun. I thought it was kind of cheesy even at the time. I didn't think it was awesome. As big of a fan as I was, I thought, well, this is okay, but it was a little disappointing to me. I don't know what it was. I thought Johnny Cage, and this has nothing to do with the actor Lyndon Ashby who played him. I just thought Johnny Cage was a little over the top, a little annoying. They got the visuals pretty well, I thought. I loved Scorpion. I loved Sub-Zero. Didn't like the fact that they're supposed to be mortal enemies and they don't fight in the whole movie together. Everything having to do with Johnny Cage and his fights, like the Johnny Cage Goro fight and the Cage versus Scorpion fight, were amazing. Those are the two standouts from that movie. That was actually the first movie I'd seen Christopher Lambert in. I'd never seen him in Highlander or anything. Mortal Kombat was the first one. I saw him in as Raiden, and I remember going, this is Raiden? Like, he's charismatic, but he doesn't really look the character. My feelings still to this day with that first movie is it's okay. It's not a bad movie by any means, but basically Mortal Kombat is a fighting game, and fighting games typically don't have a lot of story. It really hasn't been. The last 3 Mortal Kombat games have really done really good things with their story modes in recent years. But before those 3 games, the story was kind of a mess and all over the place, which is why those last 3 games kind of rebooted everything from the beginning, just kind of pushed the reset button, starting with Mortal Kombat 9. But that's the thing, stories in video games, those story modes in Mortal Kombat, those are like 6-7 hours each. You're not going to get that in a 2-hour movie, and I'm glad they didn't try to do that. And I feel like with this new movie, fans are actually disappointed that they didn't get a story as strong as the ones you'd get in like the video game modes. And that's one of the reasons why I really liked this movie. Was it's very simple. It is cliche. There's nothing really new about how they approach the storytelling, but I like that. I like that anybody could come into this. You don't have to, I would say you probably don't have to have played the games to really understand what's going on. Some people will disagree with you and say that they have no idea what's going on. And I'm not going to go on record and say, oh, this is the greatest film of all time or anything like that. I know it's got its flaws, but I'm going to tell you where I come in. The 2 biggest criticisms I've heard from this new movie is the people don't like the new Cole character. He's too bland. And people are upset that this felt more like a prequel to a Mortal Kombat movie than an actual Mortal Kombat movie, because there's no real tournament. But I do like one of the lines in the movie. Cole actually addresses this. He says, it doesn't feel like a tournament, it feels like an ambush. I like that because, first of all, Mortal Kombat is such a big property. They could have approached this movie in several different ways. They could have given us another PG-13 movie. They could have, that you had the animated movie, I think it was Scorpion's Revenge, that came out last year. That was okay. I didn't like the animation in that too much because it was direct to video. It had a very limited budget, but I liked, the amount of blood and stuff in there. I thought that was done kind of clumsily myself though too. There's so many different ways you could approach it, and the story, the Mortal Kombat, gets ridiculous. So the fact that they kind of grounded it more in reality and toned it back a little bit and just kind of took the most bare essentials and gave us this first movie as kind of a testing bed, I like that. So I'm going to start with the Cole character. When I first heard that they were going to create this character that wasn't in the games, this kind of avatar for the audience to jump into, everybody says that should have been Johnny Cage. I'm kind of glad it wasn't Johnny Cage, because we've had not only the first 1995 movie where that was the case, where Johnny Cage was kind of the avatar for the audience to relate to, but we've had several video games where he's been the same kind of character. He's the guy who's like, what the hell? How's this happening? What's going on? So the fact that they invented a new character and it wasn't Johnny Cage, I was fine with. everybody was worried that he was going to be bland and no one would care about him. And I think that's the common consensus, is that with the Cole character, nobody cares about him. He's bland and cliche and has not the best dialogue. The reason why I didn't mind the Cole character and why I was with the Cole character, a couple of things. One, I wasn't expecting them to make him a family man. And I'm a sucker for that. I'm a family man myself. So I like the fact that the main character was an underdog who had his wife and his kid on his side, and that was his inspiration for fighting. It's very simple. They don't do anything deep with it, but I just like that aspect of it. I don't want to spoil anything, but I like finding out who Cole's heritage is at the end of the movie. It's kind of predictable. I mean, I kind of figured it out within the first 10 minutes, kind of who Cole might be related to. But I like that parallel that they make between Cole and another character in the movie. And I just like the fact, and they even have his wife and kid in the movie kind of step in and help him out at one point. During his fight with Goro, his wife steps in and helps him out of a jam. I just like that. I thought he was a likable enough character. What I was worried about was that you were going to have a situation like Sam Worthington, who was the guy from Avatar, I believe, the James Cameron Avatar movie, and just a guy with a six-pack who's very bland and not likable and is just there to please the female audience or whatever. And I thought he was more thoughtful than that. He was a likable person. He was the underdog. He was the guy who kept failing. Eventually, what I really liked too was the scene where Raiden tells him, "Go back to your family because you're failing. You're not succeeding at this." I wasn't expecting that. So I understand both sides of the argument. But I was going at it like I didn't want to see a new invented Mortal Kombat character too. When you have like 80 different characters in this franchise to choose from, and you do a bland kind of no-faced character, and I will admit that when he gets his Arcana, which is the magic powers that all the fighters are trying to get, all the chosen ones, when he gets his Arcana, it's kind of lame, I guess. The suit that he wears, when he fights Goro. Yeah, I'll give you that. I mean, I don't know what to say. I didn't know what to expect. So it wasn't so much it was disappointing. It was just like, okay, they're taking it somewhere new. It didn't bother me. I like that he was at least a likable character who was out to protect his family, and he had the heart of a hero. And that sounds corny, but I don't know. I wasn't bored by him. I kind of liked seeing him fail over and over again. And Sonya Blade, who I thought they did the characters that they grabbed from the game are not deep. Yeah, Kano was probably the most standout one, but I think a lot of people are upset that they wanted all of the characters to be over the top like that. I think it's good to have a mostly serious cast with one nut job like Kano. That's what makes Kano stand out. If you make everybody over the top, then I don't know. To me, the effect kind of wears off. I like that Kano was the one kind of oddball out of the bunch that was making all the funny jokes and the one-liners. Did I think Kano was one of the best parts of the movie? Yeah, sure, absolutely. Was it predictable what happened towards the end of the film? Yes, because if you know the history of Mortal Kombat, you know that Kano and Sonya Blade are mortal enemies. I mean, you know that if you saw the 95 movie. So to see Sonya and Kano actually team up in this way for most of the film was actually really surprising. But the ending, a lot of people are saying that they're disappointed by the way it ended. I saw that coming. If you know your Mortal Kombat lore, you know what happens between Sonya and Kano. In terms of there not being a tournament, there was a tournament kind of at the end. A lot of people didn't like the editing of the film. I come from a background in editing, so you would think that I would be just as critical about the editing here. I really enjoyed the pace of this movie, but I also understand, like, for example, towards the end, they have like 5 different battles going on at the same time. And sometimes they only give you like 5 seconds of one before cutting back to another. And it's so random how they cut across these battles. Yeah, it can be kind of confusing where you're at because you're switching between like 5 different locations. I didn't really feel the disorientation. I know when Cole is fighting the big 4-armed Goro, okay, there's no mistaking that, all of a sudden he's fighting Sonya Blade or something like that. But the editing was a little jarring. Was it bad? Not to me. I liked the pace of the film. I liked that it kept moving. The only real complaint I have about the pacing is whenever they showed Shang Tsung would just come in with his new warriors every, I don't know, 10 minutes. They would have a beat like this where he would come in and send in new warriors to attack. And then they would cut back to the training and the fighting and stuff. I didn't like Shang Tsung in this movie. I was expecting more from him. And honestly, I was a little annoyed by Shang Tsung for a big part of the film. Also, there were a lot of characters, 2 or 3 characters. There was the girl with the wings that Kung Lao fights, and there was a guy with a hammer that I don't recognize from the games. But there are a few games in there that I'm not familiar with. They could have been in some game at one point or another. That didn't bother me too much. Like I said, I've seen this movie 3 times, and I really enjoyed it. Another criticism I've heard is the music, that it was generic, the generic movie score. I really liked it, and I liked the fact that the classic, the Immortal soundtrack popped in at all the right moments, especially towards the end. Yeah, I do think that pretty much every scene with Scorpion and Sub-Zero fighting were the best scenes in the movie, for sure. But I thought for the most part they got it right, and it put a big smile on my face too. Whenever I saw somebody do a fatality, yeah, of course, I'm a fan. I've never seen that stuff in a live-action Mortal Kombat film. They've always kind of shied away from it, so I like that. Now, the other criticism I've heard about the film is that even though it's a hard R, the fights, for the most part, still feel pretty PG-13 until somebody gets killed. And again, that didn't bother me too much because the way the MPA works with the rating system, it's always give and take. If you want the big bloody kill, you have to cut back on something else. They were very close to achieving an NC-17 rating with this movie because I'm pretty sure there is a cut out there of more bloody fights. They figured, we can have bloodier fights and cut back on these fatalities, or just go all out on the gory fatalities and just, cut back on the fights a little bit. And at the beginning, the first fight between Scorpion and Sub-Zero, you had a couple of pretty bloody fights in there too. I mean, really bloody. That's a pretty strong beginning for a movie. So I see the point in that, some people, I guess, preferred their fights to be a little more gritty but it's Mortal Kombat. I mean, if you look at the recent Mortal Kombat games, there are moves in these games that are much bloodier and more painful than the fatalities, and the characters just get up and walk away anyway. That is the nature of Mortal Kombat. I've always appreciated that Mortal Kombat takes all kinds of mythologies and puts them all together. Kind of like Star Wars. There's Western mythology, there's Eastern mythology, there's Norse mythology. I mean, you've got, in the same game, you've got a guy with a hat from Japan, you've got, a Chinese monk warrior, you've got a Native American Indian guy, you've got people coming back from the dead, all in one game, and you've got a guy, who's basically a cowboy. I think his name is Aaron Gray, all in one video game. It's taking every single bit of mythology and putting it into one. So I've liked the fact that you've got basically a martial arts movie that's also a fantasy movie. There's a lot of interesting fantasy elements, and I'm really excited to see where it's going to go. And I love the hook at the end because everybody wanted Johnny Cage, and you get a hook at the end for Johnny Cage for a possible second movie. Again, I didn't mind that there wasn't a big tournament. I liked the fact that this is a movie where the villains are basically trying to pull the sheets out from underneath the good guys. And I like the arrogance of that because it made me want to hate the bad guys even more. I'm not upset that they try to change the rules. I mean, they're bad guys. Why do there need to be rules? It's a very simple film. It doesn't really do anything that original aside from giving the fans what they wanted. I went in with low expectations, and I'm going to tell you something with this whole HBO Max deal with Warner Brothers. Pretty much every movie I've seen this year that Warner Brothers has released through HBO Max, I've been very let down by. Wonder Woman 1984, I really didn't like at all. Could care less about that movie. The Zack Snyder Justice League, I don't like Zack Snyder's superhero movies. I'll come out and say it right now. I never saw the original Justice League because it got a lot of bad reviews. I wasn't going to waste my time with it. And I saw the first 45 minutes of the Snyder Cut and fell asleep. It wasn't for me. And I don't understand what all the big deal was because it's not the first time that a movie, even a superhero movie, has been recut. Look at Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut. That came out, 15 years ago? So why is this such a big deal? Because you took a 2-hour bad movie and extended it to a 4-hour bad movie? but I guess it's kind of good now. I don't know. Don't get it. Godzilla vs. Kong, I thought was fine. It was good. I'm glad I didn't see it in theaters because it was fine. But, after all that, I wasn't excited for Mortal Kombat. And then that I saw it and I was actually really entertained by it. I thought they did a goddamn good job with it. That's just my opinion. And I love movies. I don't have a bad taste in movies, but that's just my opinion, and I'm not looking too hard into it. I was looking for it to give me what I wanted. I thought the story was fine. It wasn't great. It was good. It was serviceable. It was so much better than either one of those 90s movies. Mortal Kombat Annihilation, I've talked about a little bit. A lot of people have said that it's so bad it's good. I don't like watching that movie because it's just bad. I mean, it's funny, but I don't know. It leaves me with a bad feeling because as a Mortal Kombat fan, it doesn't do anybody any favors. It's a very funny movie, but it's not supposed to be funny. I don't think they intended it to be that way. So those are just my thoughts. I don't really have a lot of arguments. I mean, I like what I like, and I didn't think there was anything offensive or bad about it. As far as fans deserving better and asking for better, I want there to be more movies like this. I really enjoyed it, and I thought they did show a lot of care. And I thought it was a good Mortal Kombat movie. I liked the Cole character. He didn't annoy me. I wasn't bored at any point in this movie. I thought the pacing was great. When I saw it was 2 hours, it felt like 90 minutes, and that's pretty high praise because I hate long movies. I really do. Long movies nowadays suck. They're too long. If you make them entertaining enough, they work. I mean, my wife actually liked the movie, and this is not her kind of movie at all, believe me. She is not into the gore, but she enjoyed it. So those are just my thoughts, but I just wanted to put it out there why I liked the movie, why it worked for me, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. So comment below, and thanks for hearing me out.